They told me my sister deserved the apartment but I didn't. At the launch party my parents went pale, because I had a surprise for them. What happened changed everything between us forever. My name's Claire, I'm 34, and I never understood why my parents bought an apartment for my younger sister, Emily, while I always had to pay rent. At the launch party, something weird went down. My parents kept avoiding my gaze like they were scared of what I might reveal. I knew that moment was gonna set the course for everything that came next. Before we keep going, drop a quick comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, it really helps the channel out. Thanks. Since we were kids, everyone always knew Emily was the favorite. I can't really explain it. There wasn't just one reason, it was a whole vibe. The way my parents looked at her, the words they used, how things just seemed to fall into place for her. I was always the other one, the one who had to figure things out alone. My dad used to say she deserved more because she was more dedicated, more talented, and I swallowed that without arguing. Maybe deep down I felt I deserved it too, but no one seemed to see it. When I was about 10, there's this one day that stuck with me. We were at home, Mom was on the phone, and I overheard my sister talking about school. "I'm gonna get a scholarship for college, gotta prove I'm better than Claire," she said with that smirk like she was mocking me. I stayed quiet, listening from my bedroom door. Later, at dinner, my parents looked at me and said maybe I wouldn't go to college because I was harder to support and they didn't want to make a big investment in me. I just froze, didn't know what to say. Right then I got it. Her spot was secured but mine wasn't. Years went by and the gap only grew. Emily, with her talent, earned scholarships and praise, while I learned to hustle, paying rent, juggling bills, never asking my parents for help. That's what I had to do to survive in that environment. They never asked how I was doing or if I needed anything. To them, I should be grateful for whatever I managed to get. The news about the apartment hit me like a knife. Not just because they bought it for her, but how they announced it to the family. Proudly, like it was some huge achievement, a celebration of her merit. No one even asked if I had a place to live or how I was managing. I was there, listening, feeling the weight of exclusion crush me. That night was the first time I really felt how much it hurt. Not just about the apartment but what it meant to me. I know the apartment wasn't the real issue. It was a clear sign that I wasn't the daughter they wanted to support, that no matter how hard I fought, my wins would never be enough. But that moment I made a silent decision. They'd see I could make it too my way. It wouldn't be easy. I needed a complete victory, something they couldn't ignore. Now looking back, I know that was the beginning. The start of my drive to prove I existed beyond their opinions. But it was also the start of an internal battle, between what I felt and what I had to plan to rewrite my story. At that launch party, everything I'd held in for years was about to explode. But they had no clue what was coming. Our family dinners were never warm or genuine. With my parents, everything felt like an awkward formality, like we were just going through the motions. When I walked into the dining room, their eyes were almost indifferent, more focused on praising Emily than including me in the conversation. The words were cold, the silence thick with tension. I'd try to start a conversation, ask how they were doing, share something from my day, but the apathy in the room was heavy. It felt like they were there just to check a box, not really to listen. The feeling of being invisible was constant. In those moments, I couldn't help but wonder if they even remembered I really existed. When I needed something simple, a hand with a medical bill or just some advice, the answers were always vague or a flat, "I can't help right now." Emily, on the other hand, got support without questions, whether it was for an extra class or something career-related. That didn't go unnoticed and made me feel even more left out, like I was less worthy or worse, less important. There was one dinner that stuck with me. I just lost my job and needed a favor. A small loan just to get back on my feet. My dad just shook his head and told me I had to learn to fend for myself, that life wasn't fair to anyone, and I needed to find my own solutions. The coldness in his voice hit me like a punch to the gut. That night, I left the table carrying a mix of anger and sadness that felt like it was ready to burst. Still, I didn't let it break me. I knew that to them I'd always be the problem child, the one who didn't deserve the same attention or chances. But something inside me refused to accept that story. I wanted more, not just for me but to prove they were wrong. What they didn't know and never suspected was that every no, every cold gesture only fueled my determination. I was planning something bigger, a way to show I didn't need their approval to be someone worth something. And this fight that seemed mine alone was about to enter a new chapter. They thought they'd had control over me for years. But at that launch party, the truth I'd kept silent was about to come out, and they'd finally see what I'm really capable of. Living in a rental was never easy, especially watching my bank balance shrink every month while bills piled up. I knew a lot of young people struggled, but for me, the difference was brutal. My sister Emily was already enjoying the apartment my parents bought her, a place I couldn't even dream of having. That physical distance between the home she had and the roof I fought to pay for hurt more than I could put into words. Every day I woke up early, rushed my coffee, and faced another grind to keep a job that barely covered expenses. The pressure to not fail, to not show weakness, was constant. And even when I got home, exhaustion and frustration wouldn't let me rest. I saw the photos Emily posted online, her visits to the new apartment, hanging out with friends, the comfort she'd already earned. Meanwhile, I tried to hide the shame of asking for help, admitting to myself I was almost at my breaking point. Some nights, I wondered if the gap between her life and mine was just luck or something deeper. My mom always said Emily deserved more. She was the perfect daughter, and I needed to learn to handle things on my own. Those words cut deep because it felt like my worth was measured by my independence, and I was drowning. But inside I had a fire burning, a silent will to change the game. At that apartment launch party where my parents and Emily were celebrating, I was there but invisible. Their joy wasn't for me. I sat in the corner watching the smiles, the lively conversations, wondering when it would be my turn. It was hard to hide the mix of anger and sadness in my eyes, but no one seemed to notice or care. But the truth was, while I seemed fragile to them, I was quietly building a plan. Every tough day, every little failure only made me stronger. I didn't want to rent forever. I wanted them to recognize what I could do, not out of pity but because I deserved it. And that party, which seemed like just another celebration of the favorite daughter, was about to become the stage where my strength would show. They had no idea, but they were about to witness something that would change our family dynamic forever. Behind the tight smile and quiet eyes, I was already ready to flip the script. The shadow of that apartment wasn't going to define me anymore. I was done playing small. It was time for the truth to come out, and for them to finally pay the price for underestimating me for so long. When I got the formal invitation to Emily's apartment launch party, my heart sank in a way I didn't expect. The invite came with that same fake smile they always wore, like it was some inclusive gesture when really, it just screamed how much I didn't belong. They wanted me there like some decorative prop just to keep up appearances, to pretend everything was fine. And of course I accepted it without hesitation, even with that tight knot in my chest that just wouldn't go away. The next day, staring at that thick paper invite on my desk, my mind wouldn't stop racing. The party was the perfect symbol of the family's unfairness, a celebration of my sister's privilege, the one they insisted she deserved more. If I refused to go, it'd just make me look like I was complaining again, like I was ungrateful. The label they stuck on me since forever. So I faked being fine even though inside I was spiraling. That whole week leading up to the party, every interaction with my parents was this silent tension. They'd talk about planning the party, who was coming, all the details, and I'd just nod along smiling while my body buzzed with anxiety. I'd catch myself in the mirror, practicing how to look like just another guest. Calm, polite, basically invisible. But my mind, it was already miles away. I knew that night wouldn't just be a party. It would be my moment. The stage for the shift I'd been silently preparing. While the family obsessed over guest lists and decorations, I was quietly taking notes. Watching every move, every detail, like setting up a chess game. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't venting. I was done with that. Now it was about being smart. I didn't need to call them out in front of everyone. The best revenge? Revealing the truth at the exact right time, in the most devastating way possible. Still, inside, the anxiety was eating me alive. I felt the weight of what was coming and I wasn't sure I was ready. That party would be a trial by fire. A moment where I had to be stronger than ever. My parents never imagined that the daughter they brushed aside all these years could be hiding such a powerful weapon. The truth. Looking at that invite, I felt this mix of fear and fierce determination. I wanted them to feel the impact of what I knew, to shake the pride they had in Emily with what I was about to expose. That lump in my throat? It was the storm warning. Quiet but unstoppable. The party was set. And I was ready to play my hand, even if it meant tearing down all the illusions they built about me for years. The party started with that fake sparkle typical of those superficial gatherings. Background music, forced laughs, people showing up like they were checking off a box instead of actually wanting to be there. I walked into Emily's apartment smiling on the outside, but inside, it was anything but a celebration. The place was stunning, sure. But all I felt was how out of place I was, like a stranger to my own family. My parents were there, floating from guest to guest, handing out rehearsed smiles and showering Emily with compliments. I watched them from a distance, the hypocrisy so thick it almost choked me. They spoke about Emily like she was the definition of success, like she was the only one worthy of everything they'd invested. Every word felt like a knife, even when they weren't directed at me. The way they looked at me, if they looked at all, it was either pity or disapproval. Like I was just a mistake that slipped into the family photo. The daughter who had to pay rent while her sister got a brand new apartment handed to her. That silent humiliation? They wore it like a game. Like they enjoyed watching me squirm. Emily, of course, was in the spotlight. Glowing. Charming everyone. Acting like the perfect golden girl. But I knew the cracks behind that flawless smile. I knew the battles she fought to get there. And yeah, I felt a sting of envy, not for what she had but for what she meant to them. The tension inside me kept building. I tried to look composed, but the mix of rage and sadness was a storm I could barely contain. Every laugh, every toast just reminded me I didn't belong there. This party wasn't about celebrating a milestone. It was a shrine to my exclusion. I had to choose. Let that pain crush me or use it to burn everything down. Then my parents approached. Making small talk about my job, my life. Fake, shallow crap. Trying to act like this night wasn't really about Emily's win. Their favorite. Their chosen one. I smiled back but my eyes said what I couldn't. I see you. I'm watching. I'm taking notes. And I'm waiting. And then, in the middle of all that fake laughter, I noticed something. Something small. But no one else saw it and it could change everything. A secret hidden in plain sight. A crack in the perfect mask my parents and sister wore so well. My heart skipped. That little detail? It was the key to flipping everything. But how would I reveal it? And more importantly, was I ready to deal with the fallout? The silence that suddenly hit the room. It was the calm before the storm I was about to unleash. Later that night, alone in my room while the sounds of the party still echoed faintly, I started piecing everything together in my head. My body was tight with tension, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I had to figure out what exactly they were hiding, that crack I saw in their perfect image. I went back, remembering all the little signs that used to seem off but I'd brushed aside to avoid the pain. The awkward dinners where they avoided talking about money around me, the hushed voices when I left the room, the weird looks when I asked about Emily's apartment. It all made sense now. There was more to this generosity than they let on. Then I remembered a muffled argument I overheard once in the hallway. My mom was upset about the family's financial situation. Something about hidden debts. My dad kept saying vague things about protecting certain interests. I never really got it, but it always stuck with me. I went through a drawer where they kept some old papers, bills and crumpled documents I probably wasn't supposed to see. But they told a story. Loans, mortgage guarantees, financial commitments that didn't match the lifestyle they flaunted. My brain was on fire. If they were hiding something that explained why Emily got everything and I was left out. I needed to bring it into the light. I needed to prove I wasn't the forgotten or ungrateful daughter, that I had the strength to turn the tide. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. My parents weren't the type to give up control without a fight. And Emily, for all her golden girl image, had her own flaws, weak spots I could use if I had to. While all these thoughts were spinning in my head, I kept replaying the moments they'd brushed off my accomplishments, talking down to me about my little jobs and supposed lack of ambition. I was the mistake, the daughter who didn't fit into their perfect plan. But now that image was about to shatter. My eyes locked on the party invitation I was still holding. That event wasn't just a celebration, it was a trap. A way to make it clear who was worthy and who wasn't. But I was done playing by their rules. With a clear mind and fire in my chest, I decided that night wasn't going to end the way they expected. I wasn't the overlooked girl anymore, the forgotten sister. I was ready to flip the script, expose the secrets they'd buried and take back what was mine. Before I stood up to face it all, I closed my eyes and made myself a promise. No more silence. Tonight would be the beginning of my revenge. Quiet, calculated, and devastating. The party was still in full swing at my family's house. fake laughs and rehearsed small talk floating through the air. I stayed in the corner watching the stage where my parents and my sister paraded around, celebrating the success they were so desperate to highlight. But to me it was all just empty theater, and I was the character they'd written out of the script. Suddenly I felt my mom's stare land on me. She walked over with that cold smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Claire, you really think you're doing well, don't you?" she said, voice soft but laced with poison. "It just surprises me because no one here really thinks you've done much with the chances you were given." My dad joined in with that calm tone he uses to mask a cutting insult. "You work so many different jobs, but where's the progress? You don't really seem like someone who knows how to build a career." I bit back, the anger threatening to spill over. The humiliation was silent, like a thin blade slipping in without a sound, but cutting deeper than any scream. They weren't saying this to help me. It was to shrink me, to reinforce that I didn't deserve what my sister had. I took a deep breath, staying in control. They didn't know I already had a plan. I was 2 steps ahead, just waiting for the right moment. If they thought they could keep cutting me down, they were about to learn I'm not someone you can ignore. As they talked, my mind drifted to the rough months I worked double shifts to pay rent, scraping every penny while still trying to keep my mental health intact. They weren't there for any of it, but they had the nerve to question my success. Out of nowhere, my sister Emily showed up beside them, smiling like she was queen of the night, totally unaware of the war I was fighting inside. She gave me a quick look, part pity, part superiority, like I was the defective piece in their perfect little family puzzle. The tension kept building, and for a second I thought about snapping back with sarcasm or anger. But I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed to save my energy for the real fight that was coming. "Thanks for the feedback," I said calmly, my voice steady but barely hiding the fire behind it. "I know exactly what I'm doing." My parents exchanged a quick look, clearly rattled by my unexpected response. For the first time that night, I was meeting them on equal ground, without fear. As they walked away, I felt a rush of relief and adrenaline. That little jab had been a test, and I passed. Not because they approved, but because I wasn't going to let them break me anymore. But the worst was still ahead. The night was far from over, and I knew more battles were waiting for me, maybe even harder ones. Something told me that this night still held a truth that would flip everything upside down. And I was ready for it. The party was full of fake laughter, but I could feel the tension growing with every passing minute. That apartment my parents gave to Emily, all the attention showered on her, the cold silence I lived with every day, it was building up inside me like pressure in a sealed pipe. I was about to burst. The truth had to come out. And I knew this was the perfect moment. When the time for the toast came, I stood up slowly, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward me. The music faded and an awkward silence settled over the room. My voice, firm and clear, cut through the air. "I'd like to make a toast, but first I want everyone to hear the truth behind this celebration." Faces changed. Curious looks turned into tense stares. I kept going, the weight of my words pressing against my chest. While my sister was getting an apartment from our parents, I was out there fighting to pay rent and keep my life together. The moment froze. My dad frowned. My mom went pale. Guests whispered, some looking shocked, others just plain uncomfortable. But I didn't stop. And that's not even the worst part. I found out part of the money used to buy that apartment came from a secret account. One I never even knew existed. A bank account in my sister's name, hidden from me for years. A heavy silence dropped over the room. Emily looked down, visibly shaken. "I always wondered why I was never the favorite daughter," I went on. "And now I get it. It wasn't just about love. It was a calculated decision, a split made behind my back." My words hit home. My parents exchanged nervous glances, completely at a loss for how to respond. Some guests averted their eyes, unable to handle the rising tension. My heart was pounding, adrenaline surging through me. This wasn't just about my life anymore. It was about truth, no matter the cost. And right there, in the middle of that fake celebration, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't accept silence or unfairness anymore. From that moment on, I'd be the voice of my own justice. I deserve more than to be the daughter paying rent while the other gets gifts, I finished, voice strong. And I'm going to prove it. The room froze. My words echoed like thunder, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. But along with the rush of power came fear. My parents, who had always controlled the narrative, were now exposed. I'd opened a door I wasn't sure I could close. As the silence stretched across the room, I realized that this was only the first of many battles. And to win, I'd have to be stronger and smarter than I'd ever been. The shock on my parents' faces was the fuel I needed to keep going. They might have underestimated me until now, but they finally saw it. The game had changed. The silence after my toast was like an invisible wall splitting the night in two, before and after. My parents stood pale and stiff, their carefully rehearsed expressions barely holding together. My mom suddenly grabbed my dad's arm as if bracing herself for what was coming next. Emily looked away, clearly shaken, her mask of confidence starting to crack. The guests froze too, unsure where to look or how to react. Some whispered, others just stared at me wide-eyed. That moment hung in the air like a minefield of emotion. Tension, shame, disbelief. As for me, I felt this strange mix of adrenaline and detachment. I'd never felt so alive, or so powerful. Every word I'd said replayed in my head like a door that couldn't be shut. For a split second I almost felt a cruel satisfaction seeing my parents like that, exposed and vulnerable. The ones who always pulled the strings, who decided who deserved what, they were finally at the mercy of my truth. But I also realized something. Power didn't just come from exposing the truth. It came from the silence in the room, from the impact of my words, from how that perfect little family structure started to crack. When my mom finally spoke, her voice was shaky, trying to keep control. "Claire, that's not true. You're blowing things out of proportion." But no one seemed to be buying her rehearsed version anymore. Her eyes were lost in a sea of discomfort. My dad tried to step in, his voice stumbling over some half-baked excuse. "We always did our best for the two of you." But the conviction just wasn't there, and he knew it. That's when I realized my plan was working. This wasn't just me screaming into the void. This was a rupture in the wall they'd built between us. I felt stronger. My mind cleared. This was my moment to flip the script and take control once and for all. I looked at my sister. She looked completely lost, like she didn't know if she should attack me, defend me, or just run. The weight of our complicated relationship had never felt heavier. As the room filled with whispers, excuses, denials, a few mumbled questions, it hit me. No one had answers for what I'd just said. It was the start of something new. I wasn't going to be the forgotten daughter anymore. The one always paying the price. And still in the back of my mind, one voice echoed. There's no turning back now. I'd have to be ready for whatever came next. That truth, as freeing as it was, carried weight. But for the first time I felt strong enough to carry it, and use it as a weapon. The party's silence finally broke, but I knew the ripple effect of that night would last a long, long time. And I was ready to face all of it. After that toast, everything changed. What was once awkward silence turned into a storm of clashing words and tense stares. My parents tried to keep their cool, but inside, they were falling apart. They had no idea how to handle the truth I'd just dropped. My sister, she was torn. There was guilt and fear in her eyes, but also defensiveness. She felt threatened. The confrontation came fast, but not the way I expected. My mom pulled me into a corner, her voice low and shaky. "Claire, you're making this bigger than it is. You don't have to destroy the family over something that wasn't that simple." I tried to stay calm, but my chest was burning. She was trying to shut me up, make me feel small. But I wasn't that quiet little girl anymore. "It's not an exaggeration, Mom. I was paying rent while you two bought her an apartment. That wasn't random." Saying it out loud hit her like a punch to the gut, and that only gave me more strength. I had to get out from under the shadow they shoved me into for so long. The conversation got cut short by my dad trying to play the peacemaker, but he accidentally gave more away. "We want the best for both of you, in your own ways." Sounded sweet, but it was hollow. Because for them, the best had always had one face, and it wasn't mine. That's when I knew I had to protect myself. No more letting this toxic system consume me. I needed to stand tall, build my life outside of their twisted expectations and that conditional love. Later during the party, I stepped away from the fake smiles and polite small talk. I couldn't take the hypocrisy anymore. I needed to breathe, to find some sort of peace, even if just for a second. But deep down, my decision was made. I wasn't going to be the daughter begging for crumbs anymore. My sister, even if uncomfortable, still benefited from all of it. She was the chosen one, the favorite. That made her a key player in my parents' little power game. But I wasn't playing broken anymore. The tension didn't end with that night. My parents barely spoke to me. The small favors they never gave me before were replaced by cold silence. But I didn't back down. That silence, I turned it into fuel. I started sketching out a plan for full independence. To prove I didn't need their approval to be happy or successful. It was never just about the money. It was about respect, recognition, dignity. Still, the question lingered in my mind. How far was I willing to go? What would this emotional revenge cost me? One thing I knew for sure. There was no going back. What should have been a celebration turned into a breaking point. I wasn't the girl paying rent and swallowing injustice anymore. I was a woman finally carving out her own path, far from the shadow of a family that always made her feel small. And what came after this? I couldn't wait to find out. After the explosion that night, everything was chaos. The party ended, the muffled voices of the guests turned into whispers and gossip. And my family? It was left in quiet ruins. My parents distanced themselves like I was too much of a mess to deal with. But surprisingly, it wasn't all darkness. The very next day I got a message from Sarah, a friend I hadn't seen in years. She knew, even from a distance, what I'd been through. No judgment, just support. It was like a breath of air after being suffocated for so long. Like someone was finally seeing the real me, not the twisted version my family had painted. Over the next few days my support system grew. Co-workers started checking in, offering encouragement. Even some neighbors, people I'd never really talked to, surprised me with kindness. Life was showing me I wasn't alone. And yeah, I could start over. That turning point was everything. With the money I'd saved from working hard, I moved into a modest little apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and that meant the world to me. Still, it wasn't easy to flip the switch and leave the past behind. At night, the ghosts of unfair treatment and constant comparisons still haunted me. But I clung to the one thing I had. The unshakable belief that I deserved more. At work, I started diving into new projects, proving to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. Every little win felt like quiet revenge, a message to everyone who'd ever underestimated me. And yet, the fear lingered. What if the same patterns showed up again? I needed to protect myself, to make sure no one, ever, could take my peace from me again. That's when I started thinking bigger. Not just about survival, but about justice. My version of it. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about validation. It was about reclaiming my dignity and my emotional freedom. And for that, I'd have to be stronger than I'd ever been. Life was giving me a second shot, a real chance to rewrite everything. And I wasn't about to waste it. But rebuilding? That was just the beginning. What came next would take courage, strategy, and a whole lot of patience. What I didn't know yet was just how much that patience was about to be tested. The months that followed that night felt like a long journey back to myself. After breaking down so many invisible walls that had kept me trapped, I finally started to feel something that used to seem way out of reach. Peace. Not that temporary kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but a real, deep peace. One that's built on truth, on knowing my own worth, and on the solid decision to never let anyone make me feel small again. I knew my family probably wouldn't change. The same cold looks and cutting words might still show up now and then. But they didn't hit the same anymore. I wasn't just the ignored, unwanted daughter anymore. I had become a woman who knew who she was, who believed in her own potential, and who didn't need anyone's approval to move forward. My tiny apartment, which once felt way too humble, became the symbol of my independence. Every corner of that place carried my story, my battles, my dreams, not someone else's expectations or denial. I paid every bill with sweat and sleepless nights, but I paid them with my dignity intact. That's when I realized, revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be destruction. My revenge was quiet, steady, and powerful, because it lived in my personal victory. In building a life that no one could erase, no matter how many lies they told or fake privileges they flaunted. And to anyone who once saw me as the failed sister, the rejected daughter, here's my message. The truth is a power you can't buy, you can't bury, and when it shows up, it has the strength to change everything. Sometimes it comes slowly in small wins and brave choices, but it always comes. And it always wins. Today when I look in the mirror I see a whole woman. One who doesn't need her parents' approval. One who's no longer stuck in her sister's shadow. One who isn't carrying the weight of the past. I am enough, and that's something no one ever understood. If you asked me what I've learned from all this, I'd say justice can be slow, but it shows up. Pain can be a brutal teacher, but that's where the strongest parts of you are born. And real peace. It's not the absence of conflict. It's choosing not to be held prisoner by it anymore. Most of all, I learned that the greatest revenge isn't about others. It's about conquering your own fears, doubts, and limits. It's finding freedom inside yourself even when the world keeps trying to deny it. My story didn't end at that party. It didn't end in that apartment my parents bought for my sister. It keeps going every single day, in the choices I make, in the courage to be who I am, and in the unshakable belief that nothing and no one will ever take my place from me again. The power of truth is real, and I'm living proof of that. Now tell me, have you ever had to prove your worth to your own family? Drop your story in the comments, I really want to hear it. And if you felt this message, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know.